had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning. It's 9:30 on Monday the 5th of June. This is The Point with Bev Turner. And look, Mark Dolan stepping in for Andrew Pearce.
A pleasure to be here. Holly Willoughby returns to the This Morning's sofa. Can she stay on it for much longer, with a legal inquiry now underway into the Schofield saga and MPs set to grill the show's executives?
Harry at the High Court again. He's going to be giving evidence this week in his phone hacking case, this time against the Mirror Group. He'll be the first senior royal to testify in court for over a century.
And the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is giving a speech during our show on his pledge to stop the boats. We will bring you his statement live at 11. All to come on To The Point.
Let us know your thoughts on all of our talking points today. Email us gbviews@gbnews.com. But first, here's your morning's news with Rory.
Thank you very much, Bev. The Prime Minister is set to give an update on his promise to tackle small boat crossings and the asylum backlog. In a speech in Kent later, Rishi Sunak will discuss the progress already made in the 6 months since he introduced the illegal migration bill. Well, it comes after the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, claimed the asylum system is riddled with abuse and needs fundamental change. The Duke of Sussex is expected at the High Court later to give evidence against the publisher of the Daily Mirror. Prince Harry claims around 140 published articles contained information that was gathered using methods like phone hacking or deception. Mirror Group Newspapers is contesting the claims. The UK was hugely unprepared for the COVID-19 pandemic because of years of austerity. That's according to a report from the Trades Union Congress that says that in 2020 public spending was lower than in 2010 across multiple areas, including social care, childcare and police. The report comes ahead of a press conference later today with the COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice group about the lessons they believe must be learned through the COVID-19 inquiry. The Labour leader has criticised the government for their failure to open any nuclear power plants during their time in power, calling it shambolic. Labour claims the Tories' inaction has resulted in the loss of 7,000 British jobs. But a Tory spokesperson says they're delivering the first large-scale nuclear project at Hinkley Point C and agreed to begin Sizewell C. That's the latest, but you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website. That is gbnews.com. Now, though, back to Bev and Mark.
Good morning. Good to see you. I was off all last week on my holidays, and you've never done this before.
Well,
in the daytime.
All that good work at the holiday is going to be undone by the stress of 2.5 hours with me. But listen, it's great to be here. Privileged to have so many viewers and listeners on board for To The Point, which is, I think, the hottest show on GB News, isn't it?
Is that why they gave you this job this morning? Because have you been saying that in there, Mark?
Me being nice won't last.
Thank you, though. Yeah, we're doing all right. Thanks to our lovely viewers and our listeners who keep joining in.
Well, there you go. Well, listen, TV presenter Holly Willoughby will break her silence at it's going to be at about 10 o'clock. She returns to This Morning Sofa, making her first appearance since Schofield's exit.
So, Schofield, who admitted, of course, to having an affair with a younger male colleague, he got busy over the weekend. He did interviews, he did on BBC and The Sun. He's pictured with his mum as well. So joining us now to discuss all of this, Stephanie Tatchley is with us. Morning, Steph. It was an interesting weekend for the press relating to this story. I think a lot of us, you and I included, have a slight care factor of nil, but it continues to make the headlines. Why?
It does, because this is a story that keeps on giving, and it's mostly down to Philip Schofield by courting the press. At the moment, he's homeless. ITV don't want him anymore, so the natural places for him to go to is the BBC and The Sun to try tell his side of the story. All week long, everybody and their mother and their cat have had their say on what happened with Philip Schofield and this runner. So what he's trying to do now is damage control. He's trying to protect This Morning because the show's been thrown into disrepute based on his actions. Holly now, people are asking how much did she know about this affair? How does she know? They've been co-presenters for 14 years. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to protect this brand that he says he loves, but the main fact is he lied. And if he didn't lie, we wouldn't be even here talking about this now.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, I thought the Sun interview was OK. I mean, he genuinely seemed broken. He's clearly not in great shape.
No.
And look, I've got so many emails on my show from viewers saying, be careful, we don't want this guy to enter such a dark place that he does something appalling. However, all of that said, I had very little sympathy once I watched the BBC interview. Because that's the moment where he played the homophobia card. Claiming that this was an outrage and it was overcooked because he's a gay man. Well, no. If it had been a straight presenter and a young girl, I think
it would have been more outrage.
It would have been worse. Plus, the mental health thing, I mean, clearly, you know, that is a concern. But do we really buy the victim narrative? I don't think we do.
To be honest, I think Philip came quite narcissistic. I think, you know, in that interview, it was so woe is me. He contradicted himself with many statements that he came out with. Even when you're talking about it, you realise there's actually more of his story to come out in terms of him being gay. He wouldn't, you know, address whether he's had more lovers or not. So
well, his BBC interview was very defensive, wasn't it? And I thought it was aggressive. I thought The Sun, he was humble, but for the BBC, he denied that This Morning is a toxic workplace. Is he calling Dr. Ranj a liar? Is he calling Dan Wootton a liar? Is he calling all of those producers who get flashbacks and a shiver down their spine when they hear the This Morning theme tune because they had such a horrible experience.
Well, Mark, ITV have been quite arrogant so far. Like, they're obviously going to be facing... ITV executives will be going to Parliament on Wednesday to answer questions about duty of care. And even the editor of the show, Martin Frizzell, they seem quite confident that ITV are going to come out looking good out of this. So maybe, on Philip's defence, he thinks there hasn't been that toxic culture, but we cannot deny all of the stories that have come up from people such as Eamon Holmes and Dan Wootton.
I mean, Martin Frizzell said, you know, scores are being set in the responses to this. I mean, I have my own personal score with This Morning, because when I was going on during the COVID times and the lockdowns and everything, they kind of ambushed me every time I went on air. But I was realistic that they're making a programme which is looking for headlines, right? There are people who've worked on that show, just to give a little balance here, for many years, 25 years and more. You know, some of the people behind the scenes, lovely individuals, and I wouldn't want this idea of a toxic programme to actually be about reflecting on them, because the people that I always work with were lovely.
It always comes from the top, doesn't it?
Cliquey, yes. Cliquey as presenters, absolutely. Very much so. That was always the feeling in that. You're either on the team or you're not.
I think when he denied the culture at This Morning is toxic, when he said that's not the case, it's all flowers and honey and we have tea in the morning. For me, that was the Meghan Markle moment. That was the point where one untruth caused everything else he said to cease to be credible, in my view.
I think Philip had rose-tinted glasses on during this whole interview and during this whole case as well, because he's very much seen it from his perspective. He's the one that's been sitting on this life for 3 years or so. So in his head, he's done nothing wrong, you know, in terms of adding to this toxic culture that has been building up at This Morning.
Top showbiz agent Jonathan Shalit reckons there's a way back for Schofield. Do you think that's true?
I think we're going to get a book from Philip Schofield. In terms of TV, he admits his career is over. I don't know which broadcaster is going to touch him with a barge pole, but in terms of him...
Maybe one of those shopping channels?
Maybe.
You see, he hasn't... But I am a bit baffled because he hasn't done anything illegal. He hasn't done anything illegal.
But it's the questions, Bev. It's the questions that are, you know, the questions of grooming, the questions of this unnamed runner. Why has he been able to move from This Morning to Loose Women in such a swift succession? That doesn't happen for normal TV folk. You also have pictures together with Holly, Philip and this guy. So how didn't she know? There's just, it's the questions.
I find that very difficult to believe. I mean, everybody knew.
Yeah, I think so.
I knew. Like, everybody knew. We didn't... Not to say we knew the detail, but everybody knew there was a boy, a young man, not a boy, that's not fair, a young man working on that show who had an unusual friendship with Philip Schofield. The worst kept secret in showbiz.
Speaking of showbiz, bumped into showbiz legend Christopher Biggins, who was in the building for breakfast. What a guy, what a legend. And this man said to me, why is she going back to This Morning? The bottom line is that brand is, I mean, I think it's toast, really, but it's certainly tainted, isn't it? Why does she associate herself with that programme?
Because she has to be last man standing. Like, there is victory in sitting on that sofa without him. It's a very powerful message.
She's not given into cancel culture, but Holly's brand has already been tarnished. It's been tarnished since Q-Gate, and this just adds more salt to the wound. If she steps down, it's her saying, actually, I've done something guilty, and I'm guilty by association.
Right.
I, for one, I have stopped buying her dresses, I've got to say.
Oh, Mark, why?
And the candles as well. I'm just going back to Gwyneth now.
You know, it's funny because, of course, she has got this brand. People may not know this, but in the last few years, she set up this online brand like Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop, like the brand that Meghan Markle had, no one can remember the name of that one, before she married Harry. And actually, I quite like it. I've said this before, but I think in a way that's what's happened with Holly. She wants to move out from his shadow. She wants to do her own thing. She's got great management. Her husband is her manager, isn't he?
Big TV executive.
You know, it's a product and it's a business, and she's entrepreneurial, and I think she'll probably do all right from it. But I don't think she'll stay there very long.
No, I think now it's out of Holly's hands, because during summer she won't be on the screens, and I think that's when ITV bosses are really going to have to sit down and think, are we going to rebrand this show? Because I think now the show can't be the same, because now they're going to have to vet anyone who's coming on in case anyone wants to attack Holly or talk about the Phil thing. So it's not going to be business as usual, and it's going to take a while for viewers to get used to this new normal. ITV have already washed their hands of Philip, got rid of pictures of him on the wall, so...
Yeah, I mean, that happens every time I leave an organisation, including a few online radio stations. But the other interesting thing is ITV bosses being grilled by a House of Commons Select Committee. Dan Wootton, who's very much owned this story brilliantly alongside Eamon Holmes and others. He's suggesting that the ultra-woke boss, Carolyn McCall, should step down. What do you think?
I think she should. I think this is going to be a very defining moment, not just for the ITV, but the whole of the media landscape in terms of duty of care. We don't want to be fostering this kind of industry where we're protecting Jimmy Saviles and co's for decades to come. Clearly, ITV missed the mark on many times with this Philip Schofield case, and someone needs to pay for it. He's gone, but what's happening behind the scenes?
OK. Thank you, Steph. Steph will touch you there. Now, moving on. Let us know what you think, by the way. gbviews@gbnews.com. I'll show you how to look at the emails in a minute.
I look forward to that.
Teach you how to use the printer.
Where's the, yeah, exactly. Where's the stapler?
For now, Rishi Sunak is going to be in Kent this morning to deliver an update on his plan to stop the boats.
That's right. The Prime Minister will detail the progress the government has made over the last 6 months and his ongoing plans to tackle the asylum backlog.
This comes after a new poll suggests that a majority of the country believe that Sunak is doing a bad job in delivering on his 5 priorities. So joining us now is our political reporter, Catherine Forster. Good morning, Catherine.
Morning.
Good to see you. Now, he won't be very happy about that. The majority think he's doing a bad job on his 5 promises.
Well, let's face it, part of the Brexit vote was taking back control, including of our borders, wasn't it? And so we've got 50-odd thousand people crossing the Channel last year, record highs, 606,000 people coming into the country, net migration, again, an all-time high. So I don't think it's surprising that people would take that view. What's maybe a bit more surprising is that a lot of people now seem to think that Labour would be tougher on this than the Conservatives. But I think what we will hear today is Rishi Sunak saying, we are making progress. I would say it's baby steps, but in terms certainly of Albania, they've got this returns agreement. Last year, about a third of the people from the middle of the year onwards coming were from Albania. This year so far, it's only about 1%.
Aren't we...
So a bit of progress.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't we giving the Albanians 1,500 quid to go home when they arrive? That sounds like an incentive to me. Call me old-fashioned. Somebody said, you go over, you're going to get 1,500 quid, not just the first time, but every time.
Well, and also, of course, Robert Jenrick, the immigration minister, was on telly yesterday and was admitting that actually it was only in the hundreds the numbers of Albanians that have actually been sent back. But they will argue that it's putting people off coming here in the first place because the message is, if you come, you're going to be sent packing.
Yes, it's a disaster if Labour wind up owning the idea they'll police our borders better than the Conservatives. This ought to be a strong suit for the Tories. It shows how they've really dropped the ball.
It does, doesn't it? And I mean, even Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, said that the system was broken, you know, that they didn't have control. And they've only got a year and a half maximum to really show results on this because, of course, stopping the boats was one of Rishi Sunak's 5 pledges. I don't think anybody seriously believes nobody's going to be crossing the Channel by the time of the general election. But I think the hope is if they can get it down really significantly, people will say, OK, well, this is hard. And, of course, it's a problem across the whole of Europe. Last year they had, I think, nearly 1 million asylum seekers came into the EU and Switzerland and Norway. That's the highest number since 2015 when we had that, you know, migration crisis that partly led to the Brexit vote.
What do you think Sunak is cooking up in terms of tax, Catherine? Because it feels like over the weekend he's sort of released a few little helium balloons into the ether, at least somebody has in the press, to suggest that there might be tax breaks on the horizon. Oh, feels very much like sort of just electioneering to me, that.
Well, it does, and I suspect it is, because we know now, don't we, the tax burden is at like a 70-year high, and yet public services are not in a good state. So if they're going to have any hope of getting re-elected, they really need to be able to give something positive. So possibly, either in the budget this autumn or maybe in the spring, a penny or 2 off income tax. There's a lot of MPs now really agitating to say, get rid of inheritance tax, because, of course, lots of people in, you know, houses in the southeast of England, particularly, who are fed up with the Tories and flirting with the Lib Dems, might possibly be won round if you know, they feel that that's going to be...
Do you think, though, that the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt will have sleepless nights about the idea of axing inheritance tax, worrying that the optics could be similar to when Liz Truss, when she was Prime Minister. Do you remember Liz Truss? She, of course, cut the top rate of tax, which would have cost very little and I think would have encouraged rich people to come to this country, spend their money here and live here. I think it was actually a positive thing to do. But anyway, it was received very badly. Labour capitalised on that. They weaponised the top rate tax cut. Could the same happen if the Tories move on inheritance tax?
Well, I think potentially it's difficult, isn't it? Because it will be seen as looking after people with quite a lot of assets. But I think it is different in that that tax cut was bringing down, you know, people that earned over 150,000, which is what, the top 1% or so. Whereas there's huge numbers of people with reasonably ordinary family homes who probably don't have high income jobs that are, you know, sitting on a lot of money and liable for 40%.
Mainly because the property prices have increased so much in the last sort of 3 decades, really. That's why people will fall into that bracket. It does feel, for me, the inheritance tax just feels like quite an outdated tax. That would be a vote winner. That would definitely be a vote winner, I think, for those old-fashioned Conservatives who are, as you say, who are wavering, who don't feel that their pension has gone up enough, who don't see that they can get NHS services, who look at the education of their children and grandchildren and think this is not good enough. I'd love to see some movement on that.
I do hear you, but I just think Starmer will call it a tax cut for millionaires because so many people would benefit, you know, that have assets worth £1 million or more. And that's the issue. How do they sell it to, for example, the red wall seats where perhaps, you know, the inheritance tax, the axing of it, wouldn't be a game changer for people there?
Well, I agree. I don't think it would win them many votes in the red wall. But, of course, the Conservatives are worried about the seats that Labour's going to take back in the north, in the Midlands. But they're also now really, really worried about the seats that the Liberal Democrats are going to take in the south, because the Lib Dems, as we saw in the local elections, did really, really well. So they're sort of fighting on two fronts.
Does anyone know what the Lib Dems stand for these days, though?
No.
I mean, they want us back in the European Union. That's their ultimate dream. But, you know, what are the principles? Because they used to be a kind of milder version of Labour, didn't they? Whereas now they seem to have gone even more woke than Labour, with Ed Davey, their leader, saying, of course, a woman can have a penis.
Yes, both Labour and the Lib Dems have struggled with a question that most people would think perhaps wasn't very difficult.
Do you feel the Lib Dems have shifted leftwards? Because I think that could be a turn-off from some of their original constituency.
I think a lot of people, a lot of women particularly, will worry about a party that can't say what a woman is. I do think the Conservatives have some strength in that, because I don't think it means that you're anti-trans or not wanting people to be treated fairly. But I think there is a genuine concern about women's safe spaces, etc.
How do you think Starmer's doing, Catherine? Have you noticed on some of his press pictures now, he's got a slightly different look. He's looking a bit more cash, isn't he? He's got a bit of gel in his hair. He's got a bit of gel in his hair. They're clearly working on his image.
He wears like Tommy Hilfiger sneakers and things like that, doesn't
exactly.
he? He's basically, do you know where he's been? He's been to TK Maxx. He's splashed the cash.
I won't have a bad word said against TK Maxx.
Oh, the shop's available.
No, me neither. But I think certainly his lines are getting better in Prime Minister's questions, whoever's writing them. He's getting a bit punchier, but people are not excited about him, are they, as a leader? He's no Tony Blair.
No.
He's very competent, he's not very exciting. And Rishi Sunak also potentially quite competent, we will see. Not very exciting, but I guess the thinking is that Boris Johnson was very exciting, and look what happened there.
Quite. Catherine, thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Well, Prince Harry will return to London this week. Be nice to have him back, won't it? Becoming the first British royal since the 19th century to give evidence in a London courtroom.
So the Duke of Sussex is seeking damages from Mirror Group newspapers this time over alleged unlawful information gathering at its titles.
Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker has the details.
What are you hoping to achieve, sir?
The King's son in court. The first British royal in the witness box for 150 years, testifying in his lawsuit against a newspaper group he accuses of unlawfully intruding into his private life. Prince Harry's war against the press has raged on for decades. He blames the paparazzi for their part in his mother's death. The bombshell memoir, Netflix series and recent car chase described by his spokesperson as near catastrophic paint a picture of a man who believes he's hounded by the tabloids. And holding the media accountable is something he sees as his life's work. The Duke will take to the witness box in a trial brought alongside other famous faces, seeking damages from Mirror Group newspapers over alleged unlawful information gathering at its titles. The company is contesting the allegations that its journalists were linked to voicemail interception, securing information through deception, and hiring private investigators for unlawful information gathering. Mirror Group newspapers also argue legal action has been brought too late. Allegations date between 1996 and 2011. But the company has previously accepted that phone hacking did take place at its publications, paying out millions of pounds in compensation. But it's understood Prince Harry isn't in this for financial gain. He wants to publicly hold people accountable and is expected to be critical of former Daily Mirror editor Piers Morgan. Mr. Morgan has always denied he knew anything about unlawful information gathering at his former newspaper. The trial is one of 5 legal cases Prince Harry's pursuing through UK courts. 3 against newspaper groups accused of unlawful information gathering, 1 against the Mail on Sunday's publisher who's accused of defamation, and 1 against the Home Office over its decision to take away his security when he steps back as a working royal. Despite travelling to London to attend the High Court in person, frosty relationships between him, his father and brother are unlikely to warm. King Charles is thought to be hiking in Romania, and Prince William is reportedly not on speaking terms with his brother. The trial is expected to last for a number of weeks. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Well, we have a lot more to come this morning. Prince Harry is going to be arriving at court at some point this morning. We're also going to be taking Sunak's speech live on immigration and how he thinks he's done. This is GB News.
Good morning, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Well, the day ahead, it's quite cloudy at the moment, but more sunshine will develop, particularly in the west, and we'll see temperatures rising as a result. High pressure, which has been around for a few weeks now, continues to dominate this week's weather. However, this deep area of low pressure does start to throw up weather systems as we move towards the end of the week, turning it hotter and more humid and increasing the risk of rain by next weekend. At the moment, a bit of a westy split out there, cloudy skies across eastern parts of the UK, but the cloud does lift and break and push back towards the coast, just like we've seen through the last few days, so it could remain quite cool and cloudy here. But for much of the country, it's dry and bright, plenty of warm spells of sunshine. Temperatures lifting in that sunshine to the low 20s, still cool along eastern coast, 14 or 15 degrees. Through into the evening time, we see the low clouds start to drift back in from the North Sea, and then overnight it continues its travel southwestwards. The clearest skies holding on to parts of Northern Ireland, Western Scotland, western fringes of Wales too. Elsewhere, thicker cloud and outbreaks of light rain and drizzle possible. Temperatures holding up generally 9 to 11 Celsius, perhaps lower under any prolonged clear spells further north and west. So a bit of a grey start for England in particular, some outbreaks of drizzle, eastern Scotland too. Best of the sunshine Tuesday morning across the west, and then slowly but surely the cloud lifts and breaks, though it may stay cloudy across central and eastern parts of England for much of the day. So under this cloud it will feel quite chilly, temperatures mid to high teens, but again further west in the best of the sunshine, temperatures reaching the low 20s. Looking for the next few days, it's plenty of sunshine on the cards, perhaps an increasing risk of showers across the far south by Friday, and temperatures on the warm side and feeling humid later on.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
10 a.m. on Monday the 5th of June. This is To The Point with Bev Turner and Mark Dolan stepping in for Andrew Pearce.
Now, it's one of his key pledges to stop the boats, but they still keep on coming. The Prime Minister will be giving a speech at 11 on what he plans to do next to tackle illegal cross-channel migration.
Harry at the High Court. He'll give evidence this week in his phone hacking case against the Mirror Group. He'll be the first senior royal to testify in court for over a century.
And Keir Starmer running into a storm over his green energy plans. From his own side, we'll be taking a closer look at what exactly he's proposing.
Let us know your thoughts on all of our talking points this morning. Email us gbviews@gbnews.com. But first, here is your morning's news with Rory.
Thank you very much, Bev. The Prime Minister is set to give an update on his promise to tackle small boat crossings and the asylum backlog. In a speech in Kent later, Rishi Sunak will discuss the progress already made in the 6 months since he introduced the illegal migration bill. It's after the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, claimed the asylum system is riddled with abuse and needs fundamental change. Mr Sunak vowed to abolish the backlog in asylum cases this year, which currently stands at more than 150,000 cases. Well, it comes as more than 50% of the British public thinks the Prime Minister is doing a bad job in delivering on his 5 priorities. That's according to a new poll by Ipsos UK, which found the public's top priorities were easing the cost of living and bringing down NHS waiting times. Between a quarter and a third of people surveyed think Labour would do better in delivering the priorities. The Duke of Sussex is expected at the High Court to give evidence against the publisher of the Daily Mirror. You're now looking on television at live pictures outside the court in central London, where he is expected at any moment now. Well, Prince Harry claims around 140 published articles contained information that was gathered using methods like phone hacking or deception. Mirror Group Newspapers is contesting those claims. The UK was hugely unprepared for the COVID-19 pandemic because of years of austerity. Well, that's according to a report from the Trades Union Congress that says that in 2020, public spending was lower than in 2010 in areas such as social care, childcare and police. The report comes ahead of a press conference later today about the lessons the COVID-19 bereaved families for Justice Group believe must be learned from the pandemic. The Labour leader has criticised the government for their failure to open any nuclear power plants during their time in power, calling it shambolic. Labour claims the Tories' inaction has resulted in the loss of 7,000 British jobs. But a Tory spokesperson says they're delivering the first large-scale nuclear project at Hinkley Point C and have agreed to begin Sizewell C. Well, later, Shadow International Trade Secretary Nick Thomas-Symonds told GB News about Labour's plans.
What we are looking to do with the green energy transition is to create jobs. That's why GB Energy, the creation of our state-backed energy company working with the private sector, will look to make sure that we've got supply chains here in the United Kingdom. So what I'm going to continue to do is to sit down, as I do with trade union leaders and others, and say, look, this energy transition, of course, net zero is hugely important, but the jobs are massively important as well.
An inquest into the deaths of 2 young people off Bournemouth Beach is expected to be opened today, subject to confirmation by the coroner's office. 17-year-old Joe Abbas and 12-year-old Suna Khan were rescued from the sea during the incident last Wednesday, but both died later in hospital. Dorset police say they're keeping an open mind about the circumstances that led to their deaths. Russia says its forces have prevented a major Ukrainian offensive and killed hundreds of troops. Moscow's defence ministry released a video of what it claims shows several Ukrainian armoured vehicles in a field blowing up after being hit. Well, it's after the claimed Ukraine attacked with 8 tanks in southern Donetsk. Ukraine hasn't responded to those claims. Well, meanwhile, Ukraine's military chaplains have successfully completed training with the British Army. The 2-week programme run by the Royal Army Chaplains Department saw an initial group of 10 Ukrainians train at a camp in southwest England. It provided them with crucial support, including pastoral care and moral guidance to soldiers in the midst of battle. And some breaking news in the last few moments. Holly Willoughby says she felt shaken, troubled, let down and worried as she returned to This Morning following Philip Schofield's exit. Holly has addressed the controversy surrounding her former co-host, saying, "We give our love and support to someone who was not telling the truth." It's after Schofield admitted to an affair with a young male employee. A record-breaking British cyclist is setting off today on a 3,000-mile challenge. 44-year-old Kate Strong, who holds 3 cycling world records, is making her way around the circumference of the UK on a handmade bamboo bike. She's starting from Westminster, cycling to Norwich for her first stop, before travelling to other areas, including Edinburgh and Cornwall, before finishing up on September the 2nd. Very best of luck to her. Well, this is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. Back to Bev and Mark.
OK, let's get to your emails. gbviews@gbnews.com. On Philip Schofield, Dennis from Royal Wootton Bassett says, today is the day we find out how good an actress Holly Willoughby actually is. I hope she spent enough time rehearsing her lines.
And Leslie has said, what has Philip Schofield done which is so bad? He's not murdered anyone, nor even had non-consensual sex.
Interesting stuff.
I have no segue from that line into our next guest. We're talking about Rishi Sunak. He's going to be in Kent this morning to deliver an update on his plan to stop the boats. The Prime Minister will detail the progress the government has made over the last 6 months with his ongoing plans to tackle the asylum backlog.
It comes after a stunning new poll suggests a majority of the country believe Sunak is doing a bad job in delivering on his famous 5 priorities.
So, Head of Digital News here at GB News, Dan Falvey joins me now. Morning, Dan. There's a lot riding on this speech from Rishi Sunak today, isn't there? Because when people are looking where we're looking how to cast our votes in the next, what will it be, 18 months possibly from now, this is the top of the agenda for a lot of people. And if the Tories can't own this, they're in trouble.
Absolutely. And one of the problems that Rishi Sunak's gone is he has really nailed his colours to the mast with this. He's promised, he made it one of these 5 pledges. And in fact, when he made these 5 pledges, he says, if I don't deliver, vote me out. He has said that he will deliver on it. He has made that crystal clear. The problem is that just isn't coming through in results. So what we've seen is, just a couple of weeks ago, those migration statistics came out that showed net migration at record levels. We're seeing that the Home Office internally in court cases admitted that it thinks channel crossings are going to hit 56,000 this year, which is an extra 11,000 what it was last year. So they're going up as well. So for all the rhetoric, we're not seeing those results. And I think that's what this speech is partially about today. It's partially about trying to brand there to be some success, because Rishi Sunak has, maybe made a big error by putting so much of his premiership on.
And also, what he's reacting to, of course, is the fact that the unfairness, the injustice of putting up so many people has been amplified, particularly over the weekend, because we had other migrants in the hotel in London complaining, talking to the press and saying, this isn't fair, there are 3 of us to a bedroom, or the hotel doesn't smell very nice, or there wasn't particularly good quality cooked breakfast.
And we've been here 2 years.
and we've been here 2 years. I think we can all get on board with that complaint, though, because none of us want people to be here for that length of time. But the optics of this are horrendous when you have people seeking asylum standing on the side of the road in Kensington saying, my accommodation is not up to scratch. He's got to do something.
Absolutely. But the problem is, actually do something. That's the key here. It can't just be more rhetoric. Because we've seen, for a number of years now, a lot of rhetoric from this Conservative government. We saw, Brexit was going to take back control of the borders. We'd be able to end this illegal migration. Number of channel crossings has gone up. We then saw, Priti Patel was putting bills through Parliament that were going to curb illegal migration. It went up. We then announced the Rwanda scheme and said that was going to curb it. Well, that's now stuck in the courts, and a number of channel crossings continues to go up. And every time we're getting closer and closer to the next election, there's a real danger that voters will go, well, hold on. I don't necessarily trust Labour on illegal migration, but I don't trust you either. So it almost, crosses it out, and neither one wins on this.
Well, yes, but, does anyone in their right mind think that the cervix-free leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, the ultra-woke, soon-to-be Prime Minister, would do a better job with illegal immigration? Many in his party are quite supportive of not just the illegal migrant crossings. They want so-called safe routes, which I think would just be a motorway for more people to come. And therefore, for Labour to own that story is truly disastrous for the Conservatives. I wonder whether the pitch for the Tories at the next election is, we're terrible, but Labour would be worse.
It's not exactly a particularly uplifting message, is it, to go to the election?
But that's about, if I was a strategist, that's pretty much the sell, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're a disaster, but you don't want Starmer, do you?
And the problem is, when you go for that kind of message, though, is no one feels good right now. And that allows for an opposition party, be it Labour, be it any opposition party, can tap into that and say, give change a chance. That is, after all, what led to Brexit in 2016. And for a lot of people, it was, we're not happy with the current situation. By voting out, we can see this change. Let's do something different. Let's try something different. And the more that the Conservatives go on about illegal migration but fail to actually tackle the issue, the more people think maybe change is worth a chance.
I tell you what caught my eye this weekend, I don't know about you two, but was this story about Rishi Sunak giving £3 million to an American university. He's come in for a lot of stick for this, and people are saying, well, our own universities aren't good. But it's a bit of a strange story, isn't it? Because he's not going to give his own money to prop up British universities. What was that about, Dan?
Absolutely. So this is Rishi Sunak's wife, one of the universities in America that she had been to. As a couple, they have donated money to that. Now, this has created plenty of arguments from the Labour Party saying, you know, this is awful, he's giving this money to these universities, what about our own universities? I don't think most people in the UK care how people spend their private money like that, and I don't think... This is classic them trying to create that class war about private schools, it's about now with this. I don't think most people really care about what Rishi Sunak's doing with his private money. They care about what he's doing with the public money. They want to see the lower taxes, they want to see the migrant crisis fixed. I'm not sure this is that big a story. This seems like something that Labour are trying to stir up for the sake of it.
OK. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks.
Right, moving on. Prince Harry will return to London this week, becoming the first British royal since the 19th century to give evidence in a London courtroom.
The Duke of Sussex is seeking damages from Mirror Group newspapers over alleged unlawful information gathering at its titles.
Our royal correspondent Cameron Walker is at the High Court for us. Good morning, Cameron. Clearly quite a crowd of press assembled there. Just remind us what this story is about and why is Harry giving evidence?
Good morning, Bev. Yes, I mean, the world's media has quite literally descended on the High Court here in London, waiting for the imminent arrival of Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex. Now, this case, Prince Harry is taking the Mirror Group newspapers to court over alleged unlawful information gathering, as you said. And it's something which his father, the King, but when he was Prince of Wales, said it would be a suicide mission to take the press to court and give evidence in open court. But Prince Harry is becoming the first senior member of the royal family since the 19th century to be in the witness box and give evidence in his case. He sees it as his life's work to change the media landscape and hold people accountable to what he sees was unlawful information gathering and writing stories about him using information obtained through unlawful means. Now, this is a big risk for Prince Harry because the interviews he's done, both as a working member of the royal family and subsequently with the Oprah interview and then the promotional interviews he's done with Spare, he had control of the narrative. He had control of who was asking him the questions, and they were very unlikely. In fact, they hardly ever really challenged his version of events. Not this time. It's a highly experienced QC barrister who's representing Mirror Group newspapers here today, and it's his job to try and literally kind of tear Prince Harry's case to shreds, and he will be cross-examining Prince Harry's evidence and will try and question his version of events. And the big question is, how is Prince Harry going to handle that? Because he clearly thinks there is a case to answer here. What's going to be also slightly uncomfortable for the royal family, at least, as in Prince William, the King, etc., is that we've already seen in a separate legal case 2 months ago that Prince William's name was dragged into it when it was emerged through legal documents that News Group newspapers actually gave a substantial payouts to Prince William over alleged unlawful information gathering there. So the question is something similar going to be said in open court here in the High Court for this case for Mirror Group newspapers? So Prince Harry is expected here imminently to listen to the arguments being made. Tomorrow he's expected to be in the witness box himself giving evidence on his behalf, but the case is going to continue for 6-7 weeks, so it's got a long time before we hear any kind of verdict.
OK, thank you, Cameron. Royal broadcaster and historian Rafe Haydel-Mankoo is with us now. Good to see you, Rafe. Interesting, isn't it? William took the payout quietly behind closed doors. Harry has chosen to put himself centre stage. What a surprise.
Yeah, well, what a surprise. But we know for a fact that the media are his arch nemesis when it comes to what he sees as his battles in life. And as you said, unlike Prince William, there are two things in going strongly for Prince Harry here. One, he's not going to settle, unlike other people who like to settle. So he's going to go all the way to a verdict, and he's rich enough to endure the financial hit, even if he loses. So for him, this is high stakes. It's high noon at the High Court. He regards this as his life's mission, but as we know, the King has told him that rather than a life mission, pursuing these cases is a suicide mission. His Majesty conveniently out of the country. He owns a property in Romania, and he's there doing his annual hike and walk through there. But it's going to be a very very different experience for Prince Harry, because I'm sure his lawyers are briefing him on what to expect. But this is not going to be as cosy sofa chat with Oprah Winfrey or one of his very, very softball interviews about publishing Spare. These are going to be very intrusive questions where he's going to have to relive the most painful moments of his life emotionally with his girlfriends. He blames the media intrusion for the reason that his girlfriend, Chelsea Davy, decided to break up with him. Now, one of the great what-ifs.
Yeah.
If he had married Chelsea Davy as he was perhaps hoping.
Or is it an if
how
only?
life would... if only, yes. So you're going to have that. And also, of course, reliving of all of these news stories. I mean, there are 140 stories in question here. 33 of them are being investigated in this court case, and with headlines like Harry's cocaine, ecstasy and GHB party lifestyle, I think. So these are very delicate...
So hang on, let me just get my head around this. So he's going to have to be in court, be presented with lots of these stories. We've got a graphic here actually showing these are the various people that he's taking to court. He's got 6 court cases going, I think, at the moment, hasn't he? Or is there 5 now? We think we're 1 down, 5 to go, maybe.
Yeah.
The Mail, the Home Office, the Sun, the Mirror, Mail Online, News of the World, as was. And he's going to have to, as you say, just distillate those events, granulate them in the most minute detail. Now, of course, we won't see this because we don't televise our court cases, but there will be court reporters there taking everything down so that we can read about it.
And remember, of course, this is a High Court King's Bench, his father's Pa's bench, as he likes to call it. And the KC, the King's Counsel, is skilled, right, with a full arsenal of weapons designed to undermine you, and no matter how trained you are, to try to unseat you and make you feel uncomfortable. Now, he's not used to any of that sort of thing. I mean, King Edward VII, when he did the last case in the 1890s, he got used to everyone fawning about him. He couldn't handle being interrogated in the witness box, and I suspect we may see something of the same here. Will he break down? Will he become angry? Will he become upset? I mean, it's interesting.
It could be Prince Andrew on Newsnight all over again.
Yes, except that was one incident, in effect, is what he was clarifying. How he's going to have to go through dozens and dozens of tabloid stories.
Well, we're 4 years on from Prince Andrew and we're still talking about it. We're still using footage from that interview. So one can only imagine how long this will last.
The irony, of course, is that he's already scraped over everything in public anyway with his book and his documentaries. Maybe there's not much else to scrutinise.
Yes, but rehashing things that have now fallen out of public memory will bring them back to the fore, which I don't think is an ideal situation for anyone.
Rafe, great to see you. Can you imagine anything worse? You've been in the papers quite a bit, Mark Dolan.
I mean, I enjoy publicity, but I bring it on myself.
But can you imagine having to take all those papers, those stories in the tabloids, and explain them all in minute detail? Anyway, right, still to come. Labour says the Tories haven't built a new nuclear power station in 13 years of rule. But what will they do about it? Find out next.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning.
How are we?
Do you want to do this bit?
Yes, 10:23. You are watching To The Point. Lovely to be here. And Bev's looking after me very well. Myself, Mark Dolan and Bev Turner.
That's right. Now, this morning, Keir Starmer is visiting a nuclear power station in Somerset as part of his party's work on making Britain a clean energy superpower to create jobs, cut bills and boost energy security.
This comes as OPEC member Saudi Arabia announced it will make cuts of 1 million barrels a day from July, driving prices up sharply from this morning. Liam Halligan is with us. Hi, Liam.
Hello, Mark. Nice to see you.
Great to see you.
I didn't know you got out of bed before midday.
Not really, but the money was agreed late last night, and here I am. This is bad news, isn't it, for us, for British consumers?
Yeah, let's get on to OPEC. Let's just talk first about Keir Starmer, if I may. He's down at Hinkley Point, where we're building the first nuclear power station for many years in the UK. It's Europe's biggest infrastructure project. I was down there just a few weeks ago. Starmer is basically down there saying that he thinks nuclear is OK. Nuclear is about a fifth of our energy supply these days. In France, it's 70%. That's why energy is so much cheaper there. And he wants to say that his party will push forward with building new nuclear plants, cutting costs for consumers and creating jobs.
Yes, indeed. I mean, look, what's going to happen? The unions aren't happy with this, are they? And they bankroll the Labour Party. And this demonstrates to me that if Starmer gets in, we will have 5 years of a civil war on the left.
Well, I think the unions are pretty happy that we're building new nuclear power stations. What they're really not happy about is the fact that Keir Starmer's Labour Party is saying they won't allow any new investment in new oil and gas fields in the North Sea. This is a story we've covered closely on GB News. We still get 75% of our energy needs from oil and gas here in the UK. About half of that oil and gas we generate and mine and create ourselves. Even the government's Climate Change Commission, the sort of in-house cheerleader for green policy, says that by the end of 2030, we're still going to be using lots of oil and gas in this country. So it does seem to make sense to me to use our own oil and gas, but Labour doesn't want that. And that has really put them at loggerheads with two of the biggest trade unions in the country. Check out these words from some of these union leaders. So here we've got Gary Smith, who's General Secretary of the GMB, which is the third biggest union in the country. There's a lack of intellectual rigour and thinking. Their policies are going to create a cliff edge with oil and gas extraction from the North Sea. It's time for Labour to focus on the right thing rather than what they think is the popular thing. Because, of course, 200,000 jobs in the British oil and gas industry. And then we go on, Sharon Graham, she runs the second biggest union in the UK, Unite, massive bankrollers of Labour. Labour must now be very clear that they will not let workers pay the price for the transition to renewable energy. It's reckless in the extreme to talk about halting this industry without offering a coherent, fully funded plan for jobs. Sharon Graham actually comparing potentially this transition to green energy, what it means for jobs in the sort of traditional fossil fuel sector, with the demise of coal mining when we were kids in the 1980s. And we know the massive political ructions that had. And what we've got here is we've got the kind of metropolitan, university town, lovey side of the Labour Party, let's be holier than thou on the Green side, hitting directly the kind of red wall, blue collar, boiler suit wearing classes who get great jobs in the oil and gas industry. I was up in Aberdeen recently, talking to lots of older people in pubs and clubs. They're saying, what are our sons and daughters going to do if they're not going to work in oil and gas? There was very little here before oil and gas.
Plus the insurance policy of being able to drill for oil and gas as a backup. I think many people would agree that we can pursue renewables, no problem. But why not have that insurance policy in an unpredictable world, in a dangerous world? We don't want to be reliant on Saudi Arabia or, God forbid, Russia for future energy supplies. And, of course, we've done that deal with America to purchase shale gas. It makes no sense.
We are now importing huge amounts of LNG, we call it, liquefied natural gas, from the US. We're importing it for ourselves, but also for continental Europe as well. That has a massive carbon footprint because you have to liquefy the gas, you have to transport it 3,000 miles in a diesel fumed oil LNG ships. Then you have to regasify it. It's massively energy intensive. And talking about energy security, Mark, there was news over the weekend that the Saudis, who are at the centre of the OPEC exporters cartel, they create 40% of the world's oil production. They control 80% of the world's oil reserves. There was a meeting in Vienna of OPEC, the exporters cartel, over the weekend, and Saudi said they will unilaterally cut oil production by 1 million barrels a day. That's about 1%. That's big bananas. Saudi basically create 10, 11 million barrels a day. So 1 million barrels a day out of the 100-odd million barrels every day that the world uses, they're going to cut that. Already on global oil markets this morning, we've seen a 2, 3, 4% jump in oil prices. And that's going to eventually hit petrol and diesel prices again. And it's going to start muddying the narrative that energy prices are coming down, that the cost of living is coming down. And this is directly in opposition to what America wants, to what the UK wants. Saudi, seemingly one of our great allies, and yet they're doing exactly what we don't want them to do at a crucial time, of course. And some would say they're doing what Russia wants them to do.
Of course. God. One of the solutions, this isn't on our list, Liam, so apologies if I'm springing this on you, but Mark and I were talking about this plan now. We've got 2 trials in England. It's been trialled in Wales for universal basic income, £1,600 a month. Only 30 people are going to be given this lump sum of this trial. I'm not sure what you can establish by 30 people. And then they're going to say, does this help your mental health? Will it help your well-being if you don't go to work and you get £1,600 a month from the government taxpayer? What do you make of that?
Well, reporting the news, you're right, that's what the government is going to do. I'm quite surprised it's going to do that. In terms of a personal opinion, I've written lots about universal basic income. I think in many ways it's a kind of cry for help. It goes against all human nature to work and to provide. It seems like a kind of desperate measure. It worries me that a lot of kind of very wealthy business people, internet oligarchs and so on, they want a universal basic income in order to sort of keep the plebs safe and happy. It was tried in Finland and it was abandoned in Finland because of the impact it had on incentives. And it's also massively expensive.
And we had a dry run of it with the furlough scheme, didn't we? Liam, when did socialism suddenly win the argument?
It does surprise me that tax burden is at a 70-year high in this country, the share of GDP that goes to tax. But that's because public spending is high. Before COVID lockdown, public spending was generally around 40% of GDP in this country. It went up to 53 during the lockdown year, 2020, but it's now still around 44, 45, 46. So it seems to be structurally much higher than it was. And, it's a lesson of history, isn't it? Once the state grabs power, it's very reluctant to let power up, to give that power up. And it's hard for people to argue that the state should have less power because people accuse you of being uncaring and immoral.
Yeah, hashtag be kind, everyone, at what expense? In fact, we're going to be, thank you so much, Liam, we're going to be talking in just a little while, actually, about this fantastic report which has concluded, guess what, lockdowns didn't work. Also, we're going to be having a look at Holly Willoughby's return to This Morning. You didn't have to watch it. You were gripped to us. We're going to be taking the mickey out of it. That's after your morning's news.
Thank you very much, Bev. I'm Rory Smith in the GB Newsroom. Holly Willoughby has returned to the This Morning sofa for the first time following Philip Schofield's exit, saying she felt shaken, troubled and let down by him after he admitted to an affair with a young male employee. Opening the show, she said, "We give our love and support to someone who was not telling the truth." The Prime Minister is set to give an update on his promise to tackle small boat crossings and the asylum backlog. In a speech in Kent later, Rishi Sunak will discuss the progress already made in the 6 months since he introduced the illegal migration bill. It comes after the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, claimed the asylum system is riddled with abuse and needs fundamental change. The Duke of Sussex is expected at the High Court at any moment to give evidence against the publisher of the Daily Mirror. Prince Harry claims around 140 published articles contained information that was gathered using methods like phone hacking or deception. Mirror Group Newspapers is contesting those claims. The UK was hugely unprepared for the COVID-19 pandemic because of years of austerity. That's according to a report from the Trades Union Congress that says that in 2020, public spending was lower than in 2010 across multiple areas, including social care, childcare and policing. The report comes ahead of a press conference later today with the COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice group about the lessons they believe must be learned through the COVID-19 inquiry. The Labour leader has criticised the government for their failure to open any nuclear power plants during their time in power, calling it shambolic. Labour claims the Tories' inaction has resulted in the loss of 7,000 British jobs. But a Tory spokesperson says they're delivering the first large-scale nuclear project at Hinkley Point C and agreed to begin Sizewell C. You're up to date, but you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website. That is gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
All right, let's take a look at today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2403 and €1.1599. The price of gold, that's sitting at £1,565 and 63 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100, that is at 7,650 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Good morning, it's 10:38. This is To The Point on GB News with Mark Dolan this morning and Bev Turner. Now, TV presenter Holly Willoughby, she's broken her silence after returning to this morning's sofa this morning. You don't know about that because you've been watching us, but this is what she had to say.
You, me and all of us at This Morning gave our love and support to someone who was not telling the truth, who acted in a way that they themselves felt that they had to resign from ITV and step down from a career that they loved. That is a lot to process. And it's equally hard to see the toll that it's taken on their own mental health. I think what unites us all now is a desire to heal for the health and well-being of everyone.
I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry.
Where do you start? Dressed in virginal white, because, of course, she's very innocent.
Well, I mean, look, this is a TV presenter who's left his job because he had a consensual relationship with somebody that everybody else is disapproving of. It does not require that amount of serious... Like, nobody's died here. There's no war. What did you make of it?
It's ridiculous. I mean,
is.
At the beginning, she said, how are you all? I hope you're all OK. All she's worried about is her career and her bank balance. She talked about wanting a new chapter. I bet she does. I think it's an outrage that she's back on that show. The programme is tainted. If she was serious about reinventing herself and moving on, she would have left that programme.
Do you know what also she did in that speech? She managed to shoehorn in lots of references to the theme of her business, which is about well-being and mental health. And she said about, we have to all strive for our health and well-being. It was almost like she was doing a nod to the camera. Check out my brand on Instagram. Right, let's talk to our London reporter, Lisa Hartle now, who's outside TV Centre in West London. Good morning, Lisa. Well, obviously, Mark and I are incredibly impressed with the sincerity and authenticity and integrity of that beautiful wartime monologue we just got from Holly Willoughby. What did you make of it?
Well, it was. I can tell you what some of the points of what she raised there. So obviously, this is the first time in 2 weeks that she's been on the sofa. First time back after Philip Schofield departed from the show. She also went on to talk about how what unites us all now is the desire to heal for the health and well-being of everyone. She hopes that as we start this new chapter and get back to the place of warmth and magic that this show holds for us all, we can all find strength in each other. She also thanked everyone for all the kind messages she's received and thanked them all for being there this morning watching. And then on behalf of herself, Josie, Dermot, Alison, Craig and every person that she said works on the show every day will continue to work hard to bring everyone the show that people love. And then she hugged her co-presenter, Josie Gibson, who she'll also be presenting with tomorrow. And then it's believed the day after that she'll be presenting with Craig Doyle. So, and all of this is ahead of, obviously, tomorrow, which is where ITV bosses are predicted to be quizzed by MPs at that committee that's being held. That wasn't arranged before this reason. It was taking place anyway to discuss the media bill, but that's where it's expected that media bosses might be answering questions posed.
Oh, we've lost Lisa. Oh, I think we've lost you, Lisa. Lisa Hartle there, down at TV Centre, giving us a bit of a detail of Holly's speech.
I mean, she talked about how the show is full of warmth and magic, right? More like tension and angry stares. It's worse than this programme, let me tell you. It was more fakery. I mean, I was offended when Philip and it was Philip and Holly? Yes, were just 2 weeks ago when Philip went back to the show and they didn't even address the story.
Yes.
Which is an insult to the viewers.
Yes.
Taking them for mugs. And I think they've done it all over again today.
Yeah.
They talked about the show being a family. Well, maybe the Addams family or the Wests.
But do you know what, right? If anything transpires now, any evidence whatsoever that Holly Willoughby knew that Philip Schofield was having fun with the young runner in the dressing room, she is toast. Because that is going to come back and haunt her, because she said he lied to us and it was all very sad.
That's the million-dollar question. Has the halo slipped for Little Miss Perfect? I think she's tainted already, and I think her only chance of moving on from this would have been if she'd exited the show. If she'd said, look, there's been such a bad news story. We've heard awful allegations about the atmosphere on the programme. Philip's lied to everyone. I think it's time for a fresh start. She's missed that opportunity. And I think she's going down with a sinking ship.
Well, let's see what our political commentators who are here this morning think. Bushra Sheikh and Piers Pottinger are with us. Bushra, I'm sure there are many more meaningful issues to talk about this morning, but this is still the front page of all the papers. Go.
Warmth and magic is going to happen when Holly leaves that show. Simple as. She has failed to read the room. She needs to spend 5 minutes on social media to understand that the public does not believe you. They believe that you knew what was going on. Why she's still on the show, I have no idea. She just failed to read the room. And I think this morning needs to just let them go, start brand new, bunch of new presenters, and I think we can find that warmth and magic again.
I have to say, I love Josie Gibson. I love Alison Hammond. I like both of them. Are you familiar with either of those two people, Piers Pottinger?
Yes, I've seen them very briefly. But, I mean, what I'm looking forward to is I'm sure ITV are already commissioning someone to write a docudrama about this whole ridiculous affair, which clearly hasn't ended yet. But just about everything else in the world that's going on is much more important than this.
Talking of which, let's gear change now. Right, Piers, let's go to this story about electric cars. Rowan Atkinson was one of the first, actually, high-profile people to come out and say he feels he was conned about electric cars. They're not quite the panacea that we were hoping for.
Well, more and more it seems that way. I mean, the Mail this morning have got a story about the cars being... Originally, it was claimed they'd be greener and cheaper, and now they look like being more expensive to run. Also, because they're so much heavier, the batteries are colossally heavy, they're causing more potholes in the road, as well as in the Telegraph, there's a story about how they can affect multi-storey car parks because they're getting double the weight. And most of these car parks were built in the 60s or 70s, and therefore, you know, there could be a horrific accident waiting to happen there as we have more and more of these cars. So I don't know who's behind this anti-EV lobby, but it's quite powerful at the moment, and they may not be the panacea, the instant panacea that they were originally thought to be.
Well, I had Quentin Wilson on the show last night. Of course, he's a motoring journalist, one of the original presenters of Top Gear when it was good. And he said, look, it's still an issue with the cost of these vehicles and also charging them, but it will come. And there is one strong point to make, which is who doesn't want cleaner air? And you will get that with EVs.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm entirely in favour of them, and again, it's still relatively early days. I mean, Elon Musk and Tesla kind of move things very rapidly, but the battery technology seems to be lagging behind. So these hugely heavy batteries, I'm sure, in a few years' time, will be a thing of the past.
Yeah.
Rather like our iPhones, and you know, batteries get smaller and have much more capacity.
For our viewers and listeners, an EV is not an option at the moment, but hopefully in a few years' time, the price of those vehicles will come down, and that will be the game changer, won't it?
It might.
Absolutely, it must do.
It might be, but Bushra, I spend quite a lot of my day looking for my mobile phone charger. I can't imagine anything worse than also having to drive around trying to find somewhere to charge my car.
Yeah,
the inconvenience factor for me will always rule these out.
Yeah, you know, and I don't have one personally, but I did borrow a friend of mine, and when I had to go long distance, you have to stop and recharge, and it's quite an inconvenience when you have kids in the car and you have to stop off for at least another 30, 40 minutes when you wouldn't have to if you were a diesel and petrol car. So the inconvenience factor is definitely still there. But I feel like it's still a bit more, it's more of a fad and a trend at the moment. I still feel like we're in that kind of environment.
Almost.
It is an experiment. I think people are jumping on the bandwagon because it is an exciting idea.
Yeah.
And again, you know, I do believe, Piers, that yes, we are kind of in the kind of early stages of it, and then maybe in a few years' time, things will look different.
What I think is crucial, though, the red line for me is, OK, we can have some investment in charge points and get the cost of EVs down, but we've got to be able to keep the ordinary cars that we currently own, because it makes no sense if you're driving around in a 10-year-old Volvo estate diesel, the idea that you're going to save the planet by ditching that and buying a new car, which has to be produced in a factory at great cost, it makes no sense. So I think hanging on to the cars we've got is important. And of course, the government are against that because the cost of owning an old car now is outrageous, whether it's, you know, your local voucher, which is, you know, where I live, you pay more for an older car.
Yes.
And then, of course, the ULEZ and all the rest.
But talking about old things being brought up to date, Bushra, this is a Guardian piece about fairy tales being rewritten. Martha Gill is defending the idea of doing that. What she said?
She's basically saying that fairy tales have always reflected the morals of that era and that age. So storytelling was always about that time. So now that we've moved so far along, it's okay to adapt these kind of magical fairy tales. Mark, I totally agree with you.
These stories have not evolved. These stories are evergreen.
Yes.
Yes, they are. And I feel like in order to keep that fairy tale element and the magic, we've got to keep them classic the way that they were. Like, I have a storybook with Rumpelstiltskin and Cinderella and things that I was raised on, and I've done the same with my daughter. I feel like if we want to have diversity and inclusion, why don't we just make some new stories up for that? We don't need to start fixing and changing something that isn't wrong.
I have a feeling we might all agree on this, Piers.
Yes, I totally agree. I mean, there are also some of these fairy tales and children's stories are part of social history, and they tell you a lot about the era in which they were written. And just to rewrite them, I think, is a bit of a cop-out. Well, I mean, really, it's rather like when they remake old films badly.
Yeah.
So my favourite example is The Italian Job, which was a classic film and had no need to be remade, and it was a disaster as a new film.
It's like the James Bond at the moment. You know, what they're saying is they're going to be changing James Bond, and it's going to be a person of colour, and I'm totally against that. I feel like it's the woke mob who are just getting hold of everything and changing it up. And actually, James Bond was based on a white man. Yeah. He was a white man, so why do we need to change that? Just create a new character, which we have in movies and films already, that are people of colour.
No, I couldn't agree more. Right, so let's move on. Piers, I love this story. This is about a seaside town. What did they do to reduce crime?
Well, it's marvellous. In Maryport in Cumbria, this is a tiny story on page 2 of the Telegraph. I'd have given it more space, I must say. But in Cumbria, they have put a policeman back on the streets, a bobby on the beat, as we used to call them. And the result is that versus last year, they have reduced crime by 47%.
Wow.
So having him on the street, and this chap, PC Sam Steele...
That's a great name, isn't it, for the character that goes and saves the world.
And he says, by walking around, talking to people, keeping an eye out, nipping in the bud any unsavoury behaviour, it's had a terrific effect. And now, mercifully, other forces in Cumbria and other communities in Cumbria are thinking, well, maybe we should do that. I mean, I remember in my village in Scotland that we knew our two policemen, Hector and Desmond, by name, and they would come round and talk to us, and if they saw us little boys getting up to mischief, they'd say, watch out. And
Brilliant.
We respected them, and they were part of the community. And you know, it just shows if you can make that kind of change, whilst admittedly I can't believe Maryport is the international capital of organised crime.
It won't be now.
It certainly has had a marvellous effect. And I wonder if the Metropolitan Police would dare police the streets
Well,
in
this will be
London.
controversial, right? I'd like to go back to a time when people are slightly afraid of police officers.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, that respect and fear. It's because they were figures of authority, but they were respected figures of authority. That's the point.
Yeah, it seems, Bushra, like one of these stories like, wow, stop the press, introduce a police officer and crime goes down.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, as Piers says, it's on page 2 of The Telegraph. I'm glad we're talking about it, but it does feel a bit ridiculous. Why are we not doing this everywhere? This is a triumph of common sense, surely.
Because I think one of the things is that the Met Police don't have the resources, and it's about funding and resources and the bodies. They just don't have enough bodies.
This is one guy.
But also that format and formula may not work in every county, in every town and city, because where there are just too many people, they won't have enough people to have the bobbies on the beat on the street.
You are right about that. But I think there's another issue. I've spoken to so many cops and ex-cops on my show, and they all say the culture of policing has changed.
That's true as well. I think the environment, the culture, the way that things are, what things used to work in the past perhaps don't work as effectively.
And when I
now.
say culture, I mean soft touch.
Yes. You mean just the fact that the police, we're more likely to see them doing a rainbow dance
Definitely.
on Pride Week rather than...
And just letting too many people off with a clip around the ear.
Yeah. I'd rather they were scaring teenagers.
Including that guy going into people's homes and doing social media videos.
Mizzy.
Yeah,
it is all that kind of thing. Let's just touch briefly then, Bushra, before we go, about this is a depressing NHS story. Women are finding it really harder to access contraception than 10 years ago.
They are. This is so unusual to me, and this is down to, again, the resources, funding, the NHS, and the queuing and the times that it's taking to get appointments. And at the moment, we have a climate where stories move very, very quickly. So there is also a deterrent and women that sharing their bad experiences about contraception, which is putting other women off from doing it. So it's like a combination of things happening. But 45% of pregnancies in this country are now unplanned pregnancies because of this. And that's a huge number. So, you know, we need to encourage women to go back to the GPs, go back to the doctors, and at the same time, we need to reduce these times.
You would think, wouldn't you, Piers, any indicator of a developing society would be that women have more autonomy over their fertility and their sexual health?
Absolutely. I mean, you would hope so. But of course, in some countries where the Catholic Church particularly is dominant, it causes a lot of problems because obviously family planning is not allowed under the Catholic faith. And it really, in Latin American countries and in some African countries, it's obvious. You can see what happens as a result. But this is bad and needs to be addressed.
Okay.
Unquestionably.
Well, look, in the next few moments, we'll be hearing from the Prime Minister as he updates us on his plan to stop the boats.
More to come on that in the next hour. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with your GB News forecast. Staying fine for most of us again today. Cloudier and cooler in the east, yes, but elsewhere, plenty of warm sunshine. We've still got this high pressure to the north of the UK. It's been the case for weeks now, and that continues to bring a lot of settled weather to the UK and a lot of sunshine. But once more, we've got a cooler easterly airflow coming in from the North Sea and bringing some cloudy skies. And that cloud slowed to clear across the Midlands, East Anglia, the east of England and eastern Scotland. And in fact, Although it will break up inland, I think near the coast it's going to stay grey and much chillier than elsewhere. 11 to 14 Celsius on that North Sea coast. Elsewhere, 22 to 24 Celsius in the best of the sunny skies. I think the highest temperatures Wales and the southwest of England. Into the evening, the cloud creeps back in again, and in fact it will push further west compared with previous nights, and it could push as far west as Devon and Cornwall, as well as central parts of Scotland. Otherwise, clear skies across western Scotland, West Wales, the far southwest and Northern Ireland are where we get those clear skies. A few mist patches are possible. They won't last long into Tuesday evening. Quite quickly the sunshine will return, and that sunshine will eat away at the cloud. It will push it back to the coast, but I think it will generally remain a bit cloudier through the Midlands, East Anglia, the east of England, parts of central and northern Scotland as well. And as a result, temperatures held back. I think, again, 11 to 14 Celsius on that east coast. Where we've got the sunshine elsewhere, 22 or 23 Celsius. But the cloud, again, pushing back in. Where we've got the cloud, there's the potential for some drizzly stuff over eastern hills and eastern coasts as well. Now, a change on the way for the end of the week. Cloudier skies coming in from the southwest, but also it's going to feel a bit more humid.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Dubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11 a.m. It's Monday the 5th of June. This is To The Point with myself, Mark Dolan, and Bev Turner stepping in for the brilliant Andrew Pearce.
So Holly Willoughby says she is shaken, troubled and let down by her former co-presenter Philip Schofield as she returns to This Morning for the first time since he quit.
It's one of his key pledges to stop the boats, but still, they keep on coming. The Prime Minister will be giving a speech any second now on what he plans to do next to tackle illegal cross-channel migration.
And Harry at the High Court again. He's going to be giving evidence this week in his phone hacking case against the Mirror Group. He'll be the first senior royal to testify in court for over a century. All that and more on To The Point. First of all, here's your news with Rory.
Thank you very much, Bev. Holly Willoughby has returned to This Morning's sofa for the first time following Philip Schofield's exit. Opening the show, she said she felt shaken, troubled and let down by him after he admitted to an affair with a young male employee. She also said she wants to get the show back to the warmth and magic that it brings. Well, we're now going to cross live to Kent, where the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is giving an update on his promise to tackle small boat crossings and the asylum backlog.
Stop the boats. Today, I'd like to update you on the progress that the Home Secretary and I are making. And my message is this: our plan is starting to work. Before I launched my plan in December, the number entering the UK illegally in small boats had more than quadrupled in 2 years. Now, some said this problem was insoluble or just a fact of 21st century life. They'd lost faith in politicians to put in the hard yards to do something about it. And of course, we still have a long way to go. But in the 5 months since I launched the plan, crossings are now down 20% compared to last year. That's right, crossings are down 20%. This is the first time since this problem began that January and May have fallen compared to the year before. And this progress is not replicated across the Channel. Illegal migrants entering the rest of Europe have risen by 30%. But we are not complacent because we know people smugglers are highly organised and will change their tactics if we let them. I will not rest until the boats are stopped. With grip and determination, the government can fix this, and we are using every tool at our disposal. First, I promise to work closely with our international partners, because this is a global phenomenon. There are 100 million people displaced around the world, and European countries alone saw almost a million asylum applications last year. And this international approach is delivering. Our partnership with France stopped around 33,000 last year, 40% more than the year before. I've put cooperation on tackling illegal migration on the agenda of every international summit I've been to, from the G7 and the Council of Europe to last week's European Political Community Summit in Moldova. Last week, we agreed a new action plan with Bulgaria. We began discussions on joint working with the European border agency Frontex. And in December, I reached a deal with Albania. Because last year, nearly a third of all those arriving in small boats were from that safe European country. That's delivering too. We've now returned 1,800 to Albania in just 6 months. We've gone from accepting around 1 in 5 Albanian asylum cases to now just 1 in 50, in line with our European partners. And what is the result of all of this? Well, so far this year, the number of Albanian small boat arrivals has fallen by almost 90%. This is proof that our deterrent strategy can work. When people know that if they come here illegally, they won't get to stay, they stop coming. Now, second, I promise to improve enforcement. So we've doubled the funding given to the National Crime Agency for tackling organised immigration crime, and arrests here of illegal workers have more than doubled. Third, I promised to stop people spuriously using modern slavery claims to frustrate their removal. And since we started asking for basic evidence to back up modern slavery claims, the refusal rate has tripled. Fourth, I promised to clear through the backlog of people waiting for initial decision. Numbers published today show that the initial decision legacy backlog is down by over 17,000. And we're on track to clear it entirely by the end of the year. Fifth, I promised we would get illegal migrants out of hotels and into alternative sites, including military facilities. Today, I can confirm new large sites will open at Wethersfield and Scampton, with hundreds moving in over the summer and nearly 3,000 by the autumn. And while we're bringing those sites online, we're also making more efficient use of hotels by asking people to share rooms where it's appropriate to do so. We found an additional 11,500 places, which will save taxpayers an extra £250 million a year. And I say to those migrants who are objecting, this is more than fair. If you're coming here illegally, claiming sanctuary from death, torture, or persecution, then you should be willing to share a taxpayer-funded hotel room in central London. To reduce pressures on local communities, we'll also house people on ships. The first will arrive in Portland in the next fortnight, and we've secured another 2 today that will accommodate another 1,000. Finally, I promised not just to reform our asylum system, but to reform our laws. So we've introduced unprecedented legislation to make clear that if you come here illegally, you will be detained and removed in weeks, either to your own country or to a safe third country like Rwanda. Our Stop the Boats bill passed the House of Commons in weeks, despite the Labour Party voting against it at every turn. And we're preparing now, so that once any legal challenges are complete, we will be able to put this bill into practice. I'm ensuring we have more detention capacity to hold those who arrive illegally, enough court capacity to process their cases, and the planes to remove them to Rwanda. I know these are tough measures, and I make no apology for that. We cannot allow our generosity of spirit to be used as a weapon against us or against those who are being pushed to risk their lives in the Channel by criminal gangs. Our approach is working. For the first time, crossings are down by 20%. But we are not complacent. This won't be solved overnight, and people will continue to come this summer, which is why it is so important that we change the law. My policy is very simple. It is this country and your government who should decide who comes here, and not criminal gangs. I will do what is necessary to achieve it. I said I would stop the boats, and I meant it. Thank you. If we take some questions from the media next, and could I start, please, with the BBC?
Thank you, Prime Minister. Chris Mason, BBC News. You're continuing to promise to stop the boats. There it is on the lectern in front of you. And yet there has been around 7,500 migrants who've crossed on small boats so far this year, with the summer months ahead. Is it credible to promise to stop them? Literally no more boats?
So thank you, Chris. I think the most important people to take away from today is that our plan is working. Now, I've always said this isn't an easy problem to fix. We won't fix it overnight, and there's no one simple solution to it. But we're doing a range of things, and that's the plan I announced 5 months ago. But the message from today is that plan is working. Why do I have confidence in that? It's because for the first time since the small boats phenomenon arose a few years ago, for the first time, numbers are down. So this year, January to May, the numbers crossing are down by 20%, down by a fifth. Right, we haven't seen that before, and it is specific to the UK, because if you look at what's happening in Europe, the numbers so far this year are up almost a third. So I think that, to me, shows that the plan we put in place is working. Now, of course, there's work to do. As I said, people will still come here in the summer. The gangs will keep trying other routes. But the measures that we are putting in place are starting to work. And I think you can see that most concretely when it comes to the Albanian situation, where the number of crossings from Albania, of illegal migrants from Albania, is down by 90%. So I have confidence that the plan is working. We're obviously not there yet. There's lots of work to do, but I'm here to give people an update on this very important priority. And I think the message from today is have confidence, because the plan is working, numbers are down for the first ever time, and there's lots more that we're doing. Perfect. Next, if we could go to Channel 5.
Thanks, Prime Minister. Andy Bell, 5 News. Do you actually have any evidence that it is your policies of deterrence that are leading to this drop, and not something like bad weather, for instance, that has been actually reducing the number of people crossing?
Well, thanks, Andy. I think, look, there are two things I'd point to. One is the fact that crossings elsewhere in Europe are up by almost a third over a similar time period, and yet crossings into the UK are down by a fifth. I think that should tell us something, that something is going on here, and that's the result, I think, of the actions that we've put in place, and there's a range of different actions that we've put in place that are contributing to that. And I think the best example, as I was saying to Chris earlier, is when you look at the number of illegal migrants coming from Albania. Now, I think people will remember when we last spoke about this, I said to everyone, Albania accounted for around a third of all small boat arrivals last year, a third. And Albania is, of course, a safe European country. So we put in place a range of changes, a new deal with Albania that we negotiated, and I pay tribute to Robert Jenrick, the Immigration Minister, the Home Secretary, for all their work on this Albanian situation. A new deal with Albania that allows us to return people, a change in how we process Albanian claims, and you can see the proof is in the numbers. So since we put those changes in place, the rejection or the acceptance rate for Albanian asylum claims is now gone all the way down to around 2%, bringing us in line with our European competitors, our European neighbours. That wasn't the case before we made all these changes. We were accepting far more claims from Albania, which was not right. So we've made that change, and you can see that. We have a new deal with Albania, and now we've returned, as I said, 1,800 people to Albania since we signed the deal, and the number of Albanian crossings this year is down by 90%. Right? So I think that should give people confidence that when you do put a system in place that demonstrates to those who are interested in thinking about coming here that they won't get to stay, that they will be returned, either back to where they came from in the case of Albania or an alternative like Rwanda, that you see the numbers come down. I think that's proof that the deterrence effect can work. Now, we've seen that with Albania. That's why it's important that we get the Rwanda policy up and running so that we can demonstrate that deterrence effect to a much broader range of people as well. But I think, look, as I said, I feel confident that the range of things we're doing is making a difference. The plan is starting to work, and people feel confident that we can get the job done. Next, can I turn to the Daily Mail?
Ryan from the Daily Mail. Ryan from the Daily Mail. The two new barges, where are they going to be, please?
So on barges, we will wait to announce where they're going to be. What I would say is it's really important to me that we reduce the number of people in hotels. I think local communities up and down the country are seeing the pressure that it's causing on their areas, and there's obviously the expense. As I said, £6 million a day is being spent on housing illegal asylum seekers in hotels. That's not right. It's not fair. We need to bring the numbers down. We're doing that in a range of ways. Large sites, military sites, which we've announced today. Also, the policy to have asylum seekers share rooms to increase capacity and save the taxpayer money, which I think is entirely reasonable and fair, but also vessels and barges.
Well, how much notice will people be given? When in communities, say Portland, for example, there's been quite a lot of concern about Biggie Stockholm turning up there. Will people in communities be given enough notice so that they can be prepared for perhaps what is coming?
Yeah, so thank you, Brian. Yeah, so we do extensive engagement with local communities in advance of other large sites or barges. Of course, we should do that. That's the right thing to do. That's what we do. There are multi-agency forums that are established at a local level to bring together all the local stakeholders. Where appropriate, there's 24/7 police and security protection, and of course, local areas get funding to make sure that they have the resources and support they need to provide any services that are required. So that's the work that goes on. But what I am pleased is that we have now not just one barge arriving in a fortnight in Portland, but we've secured 2 further boats today, and then we will work through the detail and implementation of those. But I think all of that, again, just demonstrates a government putting in the hard yards, doing things that people said, quite frankly, were not possible. They said this wouldn't be workable, it wasn't possible. We have persevered, put the elbow grease in, and now we have 1 coming, 2 more on their way. That will hopefully over time mean thousands of extra spaces, which will relieve pressure on local communities because people would like their hotels to be returned to their normal use. This is a way to do it, and we're making good progress on that. Next, can I turn to the Sun?
From the Sun, you say that your plan's working, but you won't say that you'll stop the votes by Christmas. What number does success look like to you? And secondly, it's also been reported you will raise Ben Wallace's candidacy for NATO General Secretary with Joe Biden this week. Is it time for a Brit to lead NATO?
So, Natasha, on numbers, I'll let other people will judge how well we're doing. And the purpose of today's update is to give people a sense of progress. And I believe there's reasons to be confident that our plan is working. We've been through the numbers. But it's not just the number of people coming that is coming down. We're making progress on hotels. We're making progress on getting the backlog down. We're also making progress on enforcement. What you've seen is the number of illegal working raids has gone up by 50%. That was one of the things that I talked about. We've also doubled the number of arrests from our activity tackling illegal working. And again, that's all part of a plan. It all creates a deterrence effect that people should not try and come here illegally. So we've made progress there as well. So across all the aspects of the 10 points that I spoke about when I launched the plan at the end of last year, I think people can see that we're making progress on all of them, but crucially the numbers are down, and there's yet lots more to come, and then people ultimately can make a judge of whether we're doing a good enough job or not. I believe we've made more progress on this issue than anyone's made in a very long time, because it's the first time the numbers have come down. And then look, on NATO, I think Ben does a fantastic job. He's a great defence secretary. This is a conversation that is happening amongst leaders around the world more generally, and I'm sure it will continue to happen. I would say Ben is widely respected amongst his colleagues around the world, particularly for the role he's played in Ukraine and supporting Ukraine. And Britain has always been a leading contributor to NATO. We're one of the handful of countries that always met our obligation to spend 2% of our GDP on defence. Currently, we're spending even more than that. And we've been a leader in NATO operations. We're one of the only countries that participates in every single NATO operation. We are widely perceived as a thought leader in NATO. And I think if you ask the NATO Secretary General, he would agree with everything I've just said. And we will always continue to be a strong contributor and participant in NATO. Next, again, I know we're kind of conscious of time as well. Can I turn to Kent Online?
Yes. The illegal migration bill is going through the Lords today. Are you worried that that might stall things, because the Lords have had opposition towards anti-illegal immigrant policy in the past?
Thanks, Sam. So look, it's really important for me to see this new law on the statute books. It's one of my 5 priorities. I believe it's the country's priority as well to see the boats stopped. And this new law is an important part of how we will do that. Why? Because this law makes it unequivocally clear that if you come to our country illegally, you will not be able to stay. Instead, you will be swiftly detained and then sent back either to your own country if it's safe to do so, or to Rwanda or another third country alternative. That's the process that this bill puts in place, and it means that people will be processed in a matter of days and weeks, not months and years. And if we can get that working, the deterrent effect, I think, will be very powerful. That's why the bill is so important. I'm pleased to say it was passed in the House of Commons in a matter of weeks. with strong support, although the Labour Party did oppose it at each and every turn. But it is important to me that this bill does get put on the statute books, because it's an important part of how we will stop the boats. But I'd also say that I'm already doing the work now to make sure that when the bill does come into law and manages any legal challenges that we may have to deal with, that we are ready to implement it. So I'm already doing meetings almost twice a week with all the relevant cabinet secretaries to make sure that all the building blocks and elements of operationalising the bill will be put in place in advance. So that's making sure we have enough detention capacity to detain people. It's making sure that we have enough judicial capacity to hear people's cases and claims in a matter of days and weeks. And it's making sure that we have all the logistics in place to actually remove people to Rwanda. All of that is hard work, and we're at it now, as I said, twice a week, making sure that we've got everything ready so that when the bill comes into law and is ready to be used, that we are absolutely ready to use it as soon as possible. And then if we've got time maybe for a couple more. Perfect. Right. Can I go to ITV Meridian? We've got local ITV.
Well, I've got to say, you lost me at ITV Meridian. Are they still going? Listen, let's get reaction. Rishi Sunak, a tireless Rishi Sunak. He looks like his wife left him about 3 weeks ago. He doesn't know where the iron is. He has said that he is stopping the boats, that numbers are down 20% from January to May. 90% of Albanian illegal crossings are down. Let's speak to our political reporter, Catherine Forster. And Catherine, is Rishi Sunak stopping the boats?
Well, there's some progress, isn't there? I mean, yes, the numbers are down. He says they're up in the rest of Europe. Now, of course, what we don't know is how much of that is the weather, which is the one thing that really influences how many people come across on any given day. Certainly in terms of Albania, the plan does seem to be working, because it was about a third of people crossing from last summer. Now it's down to about 1%. They say that they're throwing out most asylum claims from Albanians. So now they say they're only accepting 1 in 50 as opposed to 1 in 5. But they've still got massive challenges, haven't they? I mean, not least the illegal migration bill, which, OK, it whistled through the Commons. It's now stuck in the Lords. They're discussing it again later today, but it's going to face a massive battle in the Lords and then with the lawyers. So I think if they can get it through, if they can actually put people on flights to Rwanda, that would have a real deterrent effect. But I think that's a big if. And he said as well, if we get that working.
OK, thanks, Kath. Right, joining us this morning is the Research Fellow for Migration for the Bow Group, Benjamin Loughnane. Good morning, Benjamin. Good morning. We're sort of reflecting on what Rishi Sunak was saying there, and obviously he's very keen to take credit for what looks like a 20% reduction in illegal immigrants, but can he truly take credit for it?
I'm not sure really. A lot of it would be down to the weather and down to other factors. It's not entirely in his control. But also I know he was standing on a lectern which said stop the boats. And when asked by Chris Mason whether he was actually going to stop all the boats, he effectively said, well, no, we're not going to stop all the boats. We're just going to basically reduce the numbers and try and clear the asylum backlog. But it's just not enough to stop the boats or to stop new people coming over. You've got to deal with the people who are already here. You had like 100,000 people over the past few years. Are you going to be deporting those people? Are you going to be removing those people? And do you have a returns deal with places like France or Albania? Let's face it, the Rwanda scheme is not the solution. Leaning so heavily on that scheme, which has been time and again debunked as being a very few of the people who have come over who would ever get removed to Rwanda, if any at all, because we have things to deal with like the ECHR. So, frankly, for me, it's just not good enough. I don't think he's come up with the goods.
However, Benjamin, he stood his ground on Rwanda. He said he makes no apology for this tough set of measures that he's rolling out. And he says that illegal immigration has been used as a weapon against us. Quite hawkish language, possibly trying to echo the sentiment of his more robust Home Secretary, Suella Braverman.
Yeah, the language is great, but what's he actually doing? I want him to stop telling us what he's doing and start telling us what he's done. He doesn't seem to have achieved anything as far as I can tell. He's leaning on some pretty shoddy achievements, such as, we've slightly reduced the asylum backlog and the numbers are slightly down on last year. I mean, that's frankly just not good enough. It doesn't match the language he's using. He takes a very tough line in terms of what he says, but in terms of what he does, it doesn't seem to add up.
OK, Benjamin, thank you so much. Benjamin Loughnane there from the Bow Group. You've all been getting in touch with your views on this as well. Margaret has said, my husband went to boarding school at the age of 9, which his parents paid for. The head boy was the only one that had his own room. The others were shared by 4, 6 and 8 pupils in a dormitory, and migrants think they're hard done by. Julia said, what I've seen over the years, France has encouraged immigrants to leave their shores for the UK, and our government has welcomed them with open arms. They're given free movement around the area they're staying in. 3 meals a day, money to spend, free NHS and benefits.
Right.
Yeah, it's we got some breaking news. Prince Harry will not attend court today in his hacking case. Never seen that before.
That was very exciting.
Did you order that, Mark Dolan?
I did, actually. It's one of the things I brought to the show. But listen, no, it is big news that Harry will not be attending court today. We're expecting him to appear because, let's be honest, he turns up to the opening of an envelope, but not this case.
No, apparently Mr Justice Fancourt, the judge... Is his name Fancourt? Mr Justice Fancourt. If that's not nominative determinism, I don't know what is. Harry was in court, obviously, to be looked at by his fans. Justice Fancourt has said the judge hearing the case said he was a little surprised to hear the Duke would not be attending court today.
There you go. Well, listen, the judge said that he gave a direction earlier in the trial that witnesses should be available the day before their evidence was due to be heard in case the legal team's opening speeches ran short. Andrew Green, the lawyer representing Mirror Group newspapers, said he wished to have at least a day and a half to cross-examine the Duke and was deeply troubled he would not be attending before Tuesday, which may lead to wasted time on Monday afternoon. Has he bottled it, Bev Turner?
Has he bottled it, or is he just messed up already and thought he could get away with it? Anyway, right, still to come, the Institute of Economic Affairs has called lockdowns a costly failure. Surprise, surprise. We're going to be discussing that with you next. You're with GB News. First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians
to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You're with Mark Dolan and Bev Turner on GB News. This is To The Point.
Still to come, Holly Willoughby is back. Philip Schofield isn't. What's the latest? Find out in a moment, but first, your morning's news.
Thank you very much, Bev. The Prime Minister says his plan on tackling small boats and asylum backlog is starting to work, but admits there is still a long way to go. During a speech in Kent, the Prime Minister said small boat crossings were down 20% and says a further 2 ships to house migrants will accommodate another 1,000 people. Mr Sunak also said the government is using every tool at their disposal to tackle illegal migration.
We've now returned 1,800 to Albania in just 6 months. We've gone from accepting around 1 in 5 Albanian asylum cases to now just 1 in 50, in line with our European partners. And what is the result of all of this? Well, so far this year, the number of Albanian small boat arrivals has fallen by almost 90%.
And in some other breaking news, media watchdog Ofcom says it won't be taking action after receiving 8,000 complaints about Anjoa and Doe, saying the Buckingham Palace balcony was terribly white during ITV's coverage of the coronation. The watchdog says the comments made by the actress was a personal observation, which was part of a wide-ranging panel discussion. Ofcom also says it takes into account guests' right to freedom of expression. Well, the Duke of Sussex will appear at the High Court in London tomorrow to give evidence in his case against the publisher of the Daily Mirror. It was previously thought he would attend today, but he will now enter the witness box tomorrow. The judge hearing the case said he was a little surprised to hear the Duke won't be attending today. Prince Harry claims around 140 published articles contained information that was gathered using methods like phone hacking or deception. Mirror Group Newspapers is contesting those claims. You're up to date, but you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website. That is gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
All right, let's take a wee look at today's markets. The pound, that'll buy you $1.2389 and €1.1592. The price of gold, that's sitting at £1,568.90 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 7,647 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for physical investment.
Brilliant stuff. Now, COVID lockdowns failed to significantly reduce deaths. A new analysis published by the Institute of Economic Affairs tells us.
The research has concluded that lockdowns should be rejected out of hand to control future pandemics.
Jonas Herby, Special Advisor at the Centre for Policy Studies, joins us now. Jonas, what do we know?
Well, basically we know that
the studies that were published early in the pandemic, they had limitations in the ability to account for voluntary behavior changes. So the point is that if a pandemic hit a country, then the citizen, if informed, they will protect themselves against this disease. But the first studies couldn't account for that. The studies we have in our meta study, they try to account for that. And when we do that, we find a much smaller effect of the government lockdowns.
Jonas, we had a pandemic preparedness plan in the UK that had been decades in the creation. And then thanks to the actions of the Chinese Communist Party, we ripped that up and we followed China inexplicably, in my opinion. Were you able to conclude in your research why we took that route?
It's not the main part of our research, but we do cite a few papers that look at this, and they find that countries mimic each other. So when people saw the first China lockdown, then Italy lockdown, then the lockdowns spread more or less like the pandemic through Europe. So politicians didn't act on the pandemic in the country, but on what the neighbor countries did. So there's some truth to that we forgot the plans and then did whatever everybody else was doing.
How has the reaction been to your findings? Because I'm delighted that we're discussing this, because a lot of us were calling at the time for a cost-benefit analysis of lockdowns. But there will be a lot of politicians for whom your report is very bad news.
Yeah, it's. I think it's really difficult to do this without it being politicized. But I think it's really important that you try to stay focused and look at what the data tells us. And what we did in the early pandemic, I think there's no doubt that it worked. What we did as a society. So the question is, how important was the government's lockdown compared to the individual behaviors? I think we all remember that we canceled birthday parties, and especially elderly stayed away from public gatherings and so on. And they would have done some. So no matter what the government had told us to, then the government did something on top of that. And our research show that we studied 22 studies that have looked at this, and they find very small effects of the lockdowns.
Yeah. Now, Jonas, briefly, if you can, Sweden famously did not have formal lockdowns or mask mandates. Have they been proved right?
I think Sweden is a really interesting case, because without Sweden it would have been difficult to have this debate, because they were the country that was kind of no lockdown country, and it was also a country, I think, that started a lot of speculations among researchers, because we could see that the curve bended in Sweden more or less at the same time as everywhere else, and the models didn't show that. So what was going on? And that led to a lot of research where you could see that the pandemic trajectory were more or less the same in all countries. It started with very high levels of infection, and then it dropped to low levels. And I think the lesson from Sweden is basically that you can trust the citizen to do what is needed to protect themselves against the pandemic.
Yeah. OK. Thank you, Jonas. We've got to move on. Jonas Herby there.
Brilliant stuff.
But
important
also,
that report's been published.
Do you know what else you can trust? You can trust decades of immunology, virology.
Correct.
It didn't actually just all go out the window because it was a virus with a different name.
And this is hot on the heels of the Sunday Telegraph exclusive investigation demonstrating that the government censored critics of lockdowns, including top medics and scientists.
Absolutely. No, I think that's wonderful. I think it's brilliant. And why does it matter? It doesn't matter just so people can go see I Told You So, although that is quite satisfying. But why it matters is because we must never do it again, because the costs have been too much. We are still paying the price now. NHS, teenagers, mental health, education. I could go on.
Economy, maybe?
Oh, yeah, that too. Right, now.
Still to come, Prince Harry's High Court no-show. What does that mean for his trial? Plus, our wonderful panel rejoin us. This is To The Point on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you're just joining us, the big news of the day is that TV presenter Holly Willoughby has broken her silence after returning to This Morning for the first time since Philip Schofield's exit. Here's what she had to say.
You, me and all of us at This Morning gave our love and support to someone who was not telling the truth, who acted in a way that they themselves felt that they had to resign from ITV and step down from a career that they loved. That is a lot to process. And it's equally hard to see the toll that it's taken on their own mental health. I think what unites us all now is a desire to heal for the health and well-being of everyone.
Give me strength.
Well, I've got to say, I found the whole speech vomit-inducing, but let's get the views now of Charlotte Griffiths, who is the editor-at-large for The Mail on Sunday. And Charlotte, let me congratulate you and your sister paper, The Mail, for absolutely owning this story. I think it's a matter of national importance that people like Philip Schofield are called out for hypocrisy.
That I can agree with.
Hypocrisy, double standards and lies. So well done, The Mail and The Mail on Sunday. Your reaction to Holly's tearful speech?
It was something along these lines as well, actually. I think that was about it. I think when she said but firstly, how are you doing? I just thought it was straight out of that
The
Meghan
worst.
Markle playbook. You know, are you okay? But you know, it was scripted clearly, and you know, when she said deep breaths, even that bit was clearly scripted, but she's kind of damned if she does and damned if she doesn't. If she'd spoken straight from the heart, you know, we'd probably have criticised her then as well. It was almost an impossible task, and I was quite pleased she didn't go hell for leather on the hamminess and doing a full Matt Hancock fake cry. I mean, she nearly got there. So yeah, it was hammy. It was a bit give me strength, but she played it pretty well, and she couldn't not say anything. So you know, what could she do really?
How long do you think she'll stay on the show, Charlotte? Is she already looking around for new opportunities?
Well, I did feel her rapport with Josie was simply not there, and it reminded me of those reports about how Holly was quite frosty at This Morning in the Phil era, and she didn't really get to know any of the other presenters, and there were rumours, weren't there, that Josie didn't feel like Phil was especially warm to her. So I did think, you know, they've just sort of dragged Josie on, and they just don't have this rapport because, you know, we now know, don't we, that Holly isn't this squeaky clean, lovely person that we see on screen, and that she is a bit steely behind the scenes. So I think she probably will carry on with This Morning, but she's going to have to find another co-presenter because the rapport just wasn't there, and that their fake hug. I think Josie did a really good job of trying to be nice and sweet, but you could just tell she just didn't know Holly very well.
But surely Holly needs to sling her up
presenter
and let Josie take over now. Surely Holly's the problem, not Josie Gibson.
No, I agree. I think they've either got to pair her up with someone that isn't Josie, or let Josie have a crack at the whip. Yeah, I'm with you on that. What was quite nice to see was two women presenting. I mean, no offence to you guys, but it's quite nice to see two women presenting.
I'm very female.
And that
I identify as female. It's 2023.
Somebody sort of bubbly needs to be propped up by a sort of Phil type character. It's now obviously a little bit old fashioned in the daytime TV magazine show sense. So that was quite nice to see. But you're right. I think Holly will limp on for a bit. I just think they might want to rethink the casting a little bit and the pairing.
Yeah, OK, brilliant. Thank you so much. Charlotte Griffiths there, editor-at-large for The Mail on Sunday. Right, we're back in the studio with Bushra Sheikh and Piers Pottinger are here. We don't want to talk about Holly Willoughby anymore, do we?
No, please.
OK, Piers?
No, thank you.
OK, good. That was a democratic decision we've taken here. Let's talk about Ofcom. Right, they are not going to be taking action after receiving more than 8,000 complaints about actress Adjoa Ando. Do you remember at Buckingham Palace? Remind us what she said, Bushra, and why it caused such controversy.
So she made reference to the balcony and said that it was terribly white. And I think I was here like a month ago talking about it to say that no, what she said was totally wrong, and people were right to complain about it. So this is surprising that Ofcom will not be taking any further action considering the number of complaints.
8,000.
That's huge.
Particularly given the fact that there was no pushback within that sequence of the programme to what she said.
Yeah.
You know, Ofcom, I think, is actually a very fair arbiter, and all they seek is a balanced debate. All they seek is a counter-opinion to be expressed, even briefly. That didn't happen.
The thing is, it's difficult when that's happening live in a situation. I think maybe people were caught off guard with that. Perhaps they were processing that. It was just the fact that she said it was terrible.
I hate to disagree with you. It's because they're all so woke on establishment media that they wouldn't dare contradict her.
Oh, you think it was intentional?
Well, yeah, because she went, well, no, I don't know about that, but they're not going to contradict what she said because that's the prevailing culture where where racism for some reason is back.
Yeah.
You know, you're allowed it again based upon who you're talking about. But then, just a day or two later, she went on Radio 4 and the presenter said, you've not done anything wrong.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I know that people had a totally different perception on it. For me, it was just like, how can the word terribly, that's the first word that came to your mind when you saw the royal family on the balcony. There's like so many different adjectives to describe something in a lovely way, and you use terribly.
Yeah, is the Japanese royal family terribly Japanese? I mean, where do you go with this?
Oh, I mean, first of all, it just shows, apparently this woman, I have no idea who she is, but apparently she's an actress, and she should stick to acting. Really, because comments like that were... I mean, I did see the clip of her saying it, and you just thought, well, How bizarre.
Yeah.
I mean, what an incredibly stupid thing to say.
However, is her defence freedom of speech, and is that why it's right that Ofcom have let this go? Because that was her view and she's entitled to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm afraid I agree. I mean, I don't think she's done anything illegal. She's made her comment, and it was, of course, true and accurate what she said.
Although,
I mean, as you said, I mean, is the Japanese royal family Japanese?
Yeah,
I mean,
the only thing is,
goodness
if someone else had said that about a minority group, that would be a hate crime, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work in every direction, does it? And I'm interested to look at what Ofcom's logic is as to why they aren't pursuing it in any way.
I'm not sure there's any sanction they can make against her. Is there? I mean, she's just a guest on a show.
Well, they
said something.
They could investigate the broadcast, so they could investigate that particular programme, whether they got the balance. And Ofcom have said it was a personal observation. We're all allowed to give those, which was part of a wide-ranging panel discussion, which also touched on other diversity-related topics and which contained a range of viewpoints, whereas we were saying, but it didn't. Nobody called her out on it.
I reiterate, I think Ofcom are normally, they are pretty fair in these matters. And, you know, here at GB News, it's the home of free speech, so knock yourself out. I think in the end, it was the court of public opinion which have ruled on that one, that it was really offensive what she said.
Yeah, and stupid.
Right. OK, Bushra, a record 1 in 5 first-time buyers are signing up to mortgages of more than 35 years. The interest rate situation is brutal.
I'm too old to do that now.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Gosh, yes, so am I.
Yes. I mean, this is now doubled almost in the last 2 years, and we know why. It's just the hikes of the interest rates. It's so much that people have to stretch out their mortgages for a longer term to bring those monthly payments down. But people that are taking first-time mortgages at, let's say 35, 30 years, you know, we are looking at people who are going to have to work right up to retirement or even beyond just to sustain one mortgage.
Yeah. Do you think, though, Piers, it's just a change of our times? You know, maybe we're just going to become a rental. The next generation will be renters like they are often in Europe and not homeowners, which is something that as Brits we've always felt quite close to our heart, was something that we should aspire to.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be more rental, inevitably. But equally, when it comes to mortgages, I've thought for a long time that, and I'm very against nationalisation of any industry, but I think as a mortgage is basically a commodity, it should be a centralised, you go to a central bank for mortgages, and that would be, that could be controlled by the Bank of England, and it could actually keep the rates down at a reasonable level. I mean, banks make billions of pounds of profit out of banking, but mortgage lending is a specific part of the business which serves the community.
Yeah.
And I think there's a really strong case to having a national mortgage bank which would help particularly first-time buyers.
But isn't that just good news for estate agents and house prices? Isn't that what happens every time the government intervenes?
Yes. Absolutely. I mean...
But without supply, isn't that the elephant in the room?
I mean, that is the other side of the coin, without supply. And both major parties are guilty of claiming they're going to build lots of houses, and they don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the Labour Party's plans are completely mad.
Or maybe part of this whole conspiracy is that we've got the World Economic Forum just wanting people to just not have anything and live with nothing and die with nothing, and that's what we're doing
the
here.
2030 sustainability agenda, it's all there. Can we just finish on a slightly lighter note? Bushra, a leading professor, has suggested that couples should sleep in separate rooms to start a new relationship. Am I reading this correctly?
Yes. So you know what happens, like when you have a partner that snores? This is interesting because if you've been with someone for a long enough time and you know that they snore, you know, it might get irritating at some point.
Correct.
So to move into another room isn't really a big deal when you've been with someone for 20 years. Let's say how long that relationship is. You know, you can just go and sleep in another bed and you can
But the theory is that this would relight your fire. Am I right? Is that the suggestion?
Yeah, well, they're saying that you need to look at it in a more positive way. Like, people feel really depressed if they have to move bedrooms because you want to sleep with your husband and your partner, wouldn't you? But then if they're snoring...
Mrs. Dolan is like an elephant in the sack. And she throws herself around and honestly, it's shocking. It's like one of those bucking bronco things. But
Yeah.
the other thing is, Winston Churchill was very romantic. He was in a separate room to his wife, which is how the aristocrats did it, and he would a handwritten invitation to join him in the room from time to time.
Oh, that's lovely.
Well, with some people snoring, it's not just another room they need to go to, but another house. Because also, people's houses these days, a lot of them, the walls are very thin. You can move to another room, but still be shaking the walls with the level of snoring.
Yes, exactly. Well, I think we've come to the end of the show now.
Well, we've got a second. You know, the interesting thing about it is, do you not find, if you're in a relationship, that when you're in a hotel on your own, it's heaven?
Yes.
Not having to share the bed with someone, having control of the remote control.
Well, I think it's just part of being in a hotel. I mean, I often check myself into a hotel just because I can and because I want to.
Do you?
It's lovely.
Just leave the husband and kids behind?
Just leave, not the husband, but leave the kids behind with, you know, family members, and I go on my own, and I think it's lovely. I get room service, I have breakfast in the morning, and I do that frequently.
See, I think genuinely, one of the secrets of the success of my current relationship is that my partner is at his place in Oxfordshire at least 2 or 3 nights a week.
Yeah.
So I miss him, and then I'm happy to see him.
Yeah.
When he comes home.
Missing each other is not a bad idea.
It isn't a bad thing. But I also, I do.
Or maybe once you find out that your partner is a snorer in like early stages of the relationship, perhaps that might be a deal breaker for some people, because it can get worse.
Absolutely. Right, let us do one quick story then. How about this one, Piers? The Arts Council is a Philistine organisation. Why?
Well, this is the great Lord Sumption, a splendid judge who was so
man.
wise during lockdown. I call him Lord Gumption because he says it like it is.
Yeah.
And he has resigned from the board of the English National Opera because of the ludicrous Arts Council have decided to withdraw their funding unless they move to Manchester. Now, the demand for opera in Manchester, as Opera North will tell you and other opera companies based there, is very small. So basically, it is... and why the Arts Council feel they are allowed to tell organisations they fund how to behave, I don't understand. But if you, for example, wanted to open a theatre in the middle of nowhere and put on a play that no one wants to see in their right mind, then the Arts Council are going to give you millions.
Wow.
And Sumption has quite rightly said, you know, English National Opera belongs in London. It's the capital of this country, and he's done a very honourable thing.
Good for him. Right. Thank you so much, Bushra and Piers, for joining us this morning. Thank you.
Loved it. Thank you for having me. I'm back Wednesday. You've got Tom Harwood tomorrow.
That's right. Tom tomorrow, Mark again on Wednesday. Coming up next is GB News Live with Mark Longhurst.
This has been To The Point.
See you tomorrow. First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's